And we are live. Welcome back, loyal listeners. 2.3 podcast. This is season 2, episode 19. It is Wednesday, September 18th, and we are pumped, absolutely excited to have everyone here joining us once again. We are your favorite trio of hosts. I am Hero Scroll alongside Spider Brando and Lou. Today we're going to be talking about, as always, the latest superhero news and notes from this past week, which thankfully, not too much. There was one or two big things. Admittedly, Knull in the newest Venom trailer, but we will get to that. And also, stay tuned for another kickoff for our Road to Superman and Fantastic Four series. This time, we're going to be talking about, as you see below, why these movies are going to be important, why they matter. So stay tuned for that. We want to hear from you, the 0.3 people. So make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe, make sure you join our Discord because we're going to be having a lot of awesome events. But let's not waste any more time. Let's talk about 3 important things that we do each and every week here on 0.3. That is right. We keep watching, we keep reading, and we keep nerding out. Keep watching. Lou, take us away.
Listen, y'all, I gotta be honest with you. Might keep watching. I'm going down the rabbit hole of comic historian. While I've been traveling, there's some comfort I always think of when, away from the family, away from the friends, away from everybody else. I throw on a 3-hour video and just kind of let it ride as I'm kind of doing my thing. So, King in Black, I'm reading it, but I'm also going through and watching recaps of it to kind of get as much information and knowledge and perspective as I can. We'll touch more on Null here in a little bit, but that's what we got going on.
Yeah. Uh, Fantastic series that we kind of mentioned last week as well. King in Black. If you haven't read it, definitely catch up on it now, especially now that we know Nola is indeed coming in Venom: The Last Dance. How long? Who knows? We'll talk about that in a little bit. I keep reading in preparation for what will be next week's deep dive topic in our road to Superman and Fantastic Four series. I've been reading Fantastic Four, a lot of it actually, and in this case, Fantastic Four Life Story was really good. And I started reading the 3-issue arc of the original Fantastic Four series on the Galactus. So issue 48, 49, and 50. So not going to give too much away, but great stuff there. Very important to connect these two things, right? Comics and Fantastic Four and how they feed into one another. If you haven't seen our do you need to read the comics to be a fan video, Spider Brando and Lou do a very good job on discussing that topic.
That was a fun one. And I wanna read Fantastic Four Life Story after Spider-Man Life Story because that book got me hooked. That was so good.
Yeah, they're different. They're different. I would say don't go in expecting the same type of story because I think from online reactions that's people's problem with it. But we'll talk about that next week when it comes to the comics itself. We won't spoil too much. But Spider Brando, what have you been nerding out about?
So, got these pops behind me from WandaVision. And tonight, or something that was airing 20 minutes ago, we got Agatha all along. And I have been nerding out about it the last couple weeks as we've gotten closer and closer to it. I'm excited. Join our Discord if you're not in there, Hall of Point 3, as I'm doing a Agatha episode 1 and 2 watch party pretty much immediately after we end tonight. So I'm excited for it. I'm not expecting anything crazy. I just kind of, it's nice to be in the spooky season and get I've never really been hyped for spooky season. And now that Marvel is kind of branching off into that category, I feel like it's getting me invested into the whole like season as well. I talked about this a lot last week or a couple episodes ago, but still stays true. So let's hope for some great Aubrey Plaza tonight and a show that could live up to WandaVision's hype.
Who's going to be star of the show? Who's going to be your MVP? Early prediction.
Dude, I'm going Aubrey. I have to. I think she's gonna kill it. I said this about Amelia and that she was gonna be this MVP of Secret Invasion, but like, I don't know.
I mean, in a way, you weren't wrong.
She kind of was. Became OP.
Yeah.
Yeah, bro. Those left hooks with that Drax arm, some beats an A.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it's Aubrey. Everything I've been hearing about it and premieres about it.
I'm gonna say Agatha. I think Agatha's gonna be the MVP, and it's kind of like dumb to say about her own show, but what's the actress's name?
Catherine Hahn.
Catherine Hahn. There we go. She's very energetic. Then in watching interviews about this show, I'm still not as excited, I think, about it, but it seems like they care. Hopefully, right? It seems like they put love into the series, and she's very excited about it. So hopefully that translates well into the screen. And I mean, her character was pretty good in WandaVision, so hopefully it ends up, going into the series as well.
Yeah. Like we mentioned a couple episodes ago, the biggest gripe on this show is just like what could come next out of it. And that part still hasn't. I know I'm leaving my expectations for not getting much out of it, but it's just a spooky season vibes.
That's fair. And listen, y'all, chat, I gotta apologize for my audio. I'm on the road. I'm doing this from a hotel, and my microphone does not hook up to the computer I am using, and it is terrible. So, Minty, once again, you're just cooking the point 3 in the chat.
Yeah.
I'm gonna throw this out here real quick. Billy, that's gonna be my MVP. If the show hits, it's got to do with Wanda. Billy's got to have the connection. I think that they could really do something crazy, and that's the character that kind of pulls it all together and catapults them to the next.
Especially if they're trying to set up a Young Avengers. I think Billy kind of has to hit with people.
I mean, teen, actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we know it's Billy at this point. It's the worst kept secret. But, I mean, I think other than Scar, because Scar wasn't really properly introduced, most of the Young Avengers hit with people. Like Kamala Khan, and then Kate Bishop, kind of fan favorites for people and what's going on with them. And then I forget everybody else that's been teased so far. But if they hit like another one pretty well, this could be like a good setup for a series if they do it right, of course. This all depends on how it ends up going. But I have seen a lot of people, going back kind of to Spider-Man and what you said about expectations and stuff, I have seen a lot more people hop on this train of them thinking it is a shadow sequel to WandaVision. And kind of going back to what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, how this is more of a trilogy with Vision Quest or whatever the Vision series called, but not really. I think this would be closer to a continuation of WandaVision if they go down that route.
I mean, real quick to that though, I know it's not been very in our face that this is part 2 of the trilogy, but I think by the end of this, it'll be pretty clear that this is a continuation of Wanda's story and these are the characters that are expanding on what she had set up in WandaVision and then Multiverse of Madness. So I think that's going for them at this point for fans who are latching on today. So I'm excited for that though. And if they flop on it, I think the show goes with it.
Yeah. I feel
Yeah,
like this can flop though. Because
can or can't?
it can.
Oh
mainly
yeah.
mainly because there isn't much attached to it, it feels like. Where with other shows you have like a main Avengers character attached. Like with She-Hulk, you had Hulk. So that flopped, and then for many brought down the Hulks, or the Hulk's stock even lower than what it already was, to be honest. But this doesn't have that connection to anybody. It has it to Wanda, but not really at the same time. That's more fan speculation. So if it doesn't work out, I don't think that's kind of like Minty saying. No one's expecting much. So who knows?
I mean, I think that's the draw, though. If they do give Wanda, that's a massive plus. If they do, if Aubrey Plaza's character ties in what they're doing in this show to greater MCU pieces, that's huge. I mean, I could see by the end of this, I give this show like an 8, 8.5 out of 10. I think it could get there.
Ooh. I think so. I think it could.
But it could
I
also be
know,
like a 2.
yeah, it's in that fine line, especially after like that we gotta show like Secret Invasion to level set our expectations a little bit. I'm happy. I'm not going into this to where it was the first Disney Plus show of WandaVision and just being all over it, and like this is exactly like what every show should be or whatnot.
Yeah.
I'm curious about this. What do you guys think about this? Because Minty, I agree, but from an MCU perspective in the Infinity Saga, isn't that kind of the main point of most of the shows post Avengers 1? Like you look at these projects to see who's going to show up and who's going to cameo though.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It shouldn't, and that's why I say I think in this case, this is one of the ones that it feels like it doesn't have that. You know what I mean? Like the people that are genuinely excited at Spider-Man, I think you can include yourself and maybe speak to this point a little more, are more excited about the series itself than the potential of there being Wanda. That's just kind of an extra treat if it happens. But it feels like you're really excited about Agatha and what they're going to do with it.
It's just like it's just a different type of show that we've seen. Marvel really going into the horror and like witchy side for it, and that's even something that I want to see more of, like Agatha's background and just the whole magic background, like we talked last week. How the MCU's just been lacking magic and everything. So I've also been kind of having that in the back of my mind as some extra. Uh, sorry, I was looking at the chat. I've had that in the back of my mind as extra. Like, if it happens, then cool. If it doesn't happen, then this show's pretty much gonna be a waste. But I'm optimistic, and
But
I always
quick
like. What's up?
quick question to that though, because like Wednesday, your Netflix shows, some Hulu shows. I mean, is this more you want that type of spooky season show done by Marvel Studios or Marvel Television? Or is it truthfully that type of show in the MCU so other characters can interact with it? Because from that perspective, for me, if it's the type of show, it doesn't really matter who cameos because the show is going to be the show. But for me, the allure is that type of show with MCU characters who have existed now being put into this spookier, more darker horror type of realm that is being created or at least expanded on in the MCU.
I think I'm agreeing with you. I like to see that part expanded upon. I personally never watched Wednesday. I can't lie. So like I say, as I've been saying, I'm excited because it's like a spooky show, but it's like I haven't watched many other spooky shows to compare it to because I'm just naturally wasn't too interested in it. So it's cool to see Marvel and like characters I really care about and like a universe I care about go into that side to kind of get me into that genre.
So to that point though, right, where it kind of feels like, especially when it comes to this side of Marvel, right, there isn't too many characters they could do that with. So it's kind of hard to say, oh, I would love to see these characters, right? Because you really only have realistically, like, honestly, a handful, at most 4 characters that you could see go into this type of show. That was before, and I'm looking at a figure, that's why I'm bringing it up, Werewolf by Night. You know, where I think kind of similarly, a lot of people weren't expecting much out of it for various reasons, right? It was the first special presentation. It was black and white. It was horror. It was weird. There was a lot of things going, I don't want to say against it, but not necessarily pushing it forward in the positive for a lot of casual fans, right? But I think a lot of people end up liking that a lot, right? Kind of to what the chat was saying earlier with Minty, it's kind of that expectation thing where because it's something we haven't seen necessarily before, people don't have too much expectations. And then with what you get, you can enjoy it to now where, for example, we want more Werewolf by Night. We want more Man Thing. We want to see Elsa Bloodstone's story continue into something else. And maybe this can be that for Agatha, Rio, and whoever else ends up in this series.
So, quick question. Will this be any different or make you guys feel any certain type of way in a positive sense than we got with Multiverse of Madness or Werewolf by Night? Like, is it going to be that different that you're like, ooh, like this is really original for the MCU?
It has the potential to be, as if they really expand on what I'm drawing a blank on what the Witches Road. There you go. On what that is, what that's meant for the history of that side of the Marvel universe. It can be because, for example, Werewolf by Night, although it's really good, don't get me wrong, dives into a very like its setting is where it stays. It doesn't go outside of that. And then Doctor Strange builds upon what it already built on, and then what WandaVision built on. And realistically, that's not a whole lot other than the Darkhold. So you still have a lot that you can explore and play with.
And I'm curious though, because I think this is really good, and I'm so sorry for Potato Mike. But the interesting thing is, like, I'm hearing two sides, like between the conversations we've had and kind of the internet. It's like there's this jousting between director and like production elements of spooky, of like, the ring and the girl who's crawling backwards and the hair and the theme and the tone. And then there's like the story of those. And I think that's why this show could be really good, because if it takes the story expanding on the lore of the MCU plus giving practical elements, horror like film techniques and show techniques, and it can mesh those together, I think that will deliver something that really no other MCU project has really combined, except maybe Multiverse of Madness from that perspective, which to me is really a build on Wanda's story. So that's why I'm pretty optimistic that this can be successful, is it can be kind of that thread that weaves things we've seen so far together and then pushes, her story to the next, whether that's Vision Quest or a solo film.
Yeah. And Minty, oh, go,
I
Brando.
was just saying I liked it. I like that.
Yeah. Minty, to your point though, saying about it looks like cookie cutter, and I could maybe kind of agree. But as someone who personally, and I Spider Brando again, with what you've said before, we're not really into horror like that. So cookie cutter for some people can be a very good gateway into other things, right? For example, Dragon Ball Z is a gateway anime to what ends up being a lot of people's journey into anime, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just to prime you to get into other stuff, and then you could still really like it. And it's just funny you say that because we'll talk about this later, and it's fitting because Agatha does involve Fantastic Four in comics, at least. That comment ties into a lot of stuff that we'll talk about later. Final hype meter and final grade prediction for the show.
I was just about to ask that.
Wait, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Well, I wasn't gonna do the hype meter, but the final predicted grade I was gonna ask. So I'll go first. I think my hype level is at a 4 out of 5 right now. Just because
4
we
out of
are
5, 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I'd say 8 out of 10 then.
Okay.
Yeah, we do in 10s here. We don't do in 5s.
Yeah, that's not weird. I'm not on point tonight.
No.
And my final grade expected prediction for it will be 7.7.
Ooh. Okay.
I don't know if I'm sure it's gonna have some flaws that I'm gonna not put it in the 8 territory, but 7.7 and witches just feels like I may have cursed myself, but right at the same time.
Okay. Lou?
I think this will be the closest thing that we get to a She-Hulk. I think there are going to be people that absolutely hate this show, and there are going to be people that absolutely love this show. And I think to split the difference, I'll probably say this will be like a 6.5. There might be episodes that kind of touch on that 8, but I think overall, just the way things are. I mean, being realistic and blunt for a minute, there definitely going to be a subset of fans that aren't going to like characters in this show. That's just the way it's going to go. They've been open about it. There's been no secret. I absolutely love that the actors and actresses have been very transparent that this is not going to be a show for everyone. That being said, it's still up my alley for the most part, and I think I'd be happy with a 6.57 after this and a solid story. But hype meter, I mean, it's a 5. I really don't want to see too much of what the internet's going to say in this one, so I think that's kind of a little bit of a damper for me, but something I'm definitely still going to watch, and I very much look forward to episode 3 and 4.
Yeah, I'd say the later half is probably what's going to shine better for most. Probably episode 1 and then later on. Hype meter, I think I'm going to kind of agree. Probably like a 4 or 5. Personally, not too excited for it still, but I'm intrigued. It's piqued my interest at least. And final score, I want to be positive and really say 7, but I think realistically it's gonna go 5, 5, 6 realistically. But if it does better, hey, hooray! So let us know your hype for it, what you think the final grade is going to be before you watch the series with us on Discord later on. But if you're watching this later, what you thought after you watched the first 2 episodes. So make sure you join us there. But that was a very long keep nerding out segment. In case you actually forgot, we were not in our news.
Hey, we had a final. We had to hit the final preview from the thumbnail.
We did. And you know what? That's okay because it's a good transition into the other pieces of news that we had, our quick little rapid fire news. We have a couple things coming out this week/weekend. Again, today coming out, Agatha. Tomorrow, I believe it is The Penguin. So that's exciting on HBO Max. This weekend in movie theaters, Transformers 1 is going to be hitting. The animated Transformer movie that kind of explores the origin of Optimus, Megatron, and basically all of Cybertron. It's based on stuff that's before the war, which looks pretty interesting, and hearing a lot of good things about it. So,
And you get a Shadow the Hedgehog poster if you go see it opening like within the first 300. I need to find the time to see this movie because that's the only reason why I want to see it. I need that freaking poster.
I was going to say, somebody in the chat, if you happen to go see this, Spider Brando will play an exorbitant
I will
amount
buy
of
the
money.
poster.
Yeah, he'll buy
see
the poster.
All these Funkos back here. The certain few you won't be able to have for that poster.
But he'll do good things for it. Don't worry. And then we also have Superman, the Christopher Reeve story coming out September or this Saturday as well. So the movie theater is kind of picking up a little bit after not having too much.
So that Reeves is at 100%.
Yeah,
on Rotten Tomatoes.
I've been hearing a lot of good things on that too.
I'm excited for that.
Louis tickled by good things.
Bro, that just flashback to a great time. That flashback to a great time on the podcast.
Yeah.
I will do great things.
Great things. Great things. We lost him. It was so good we lost him.
I think that was a couple lives ago. You know, if you're watching this, go comment down below what live that was from, and I'll send you a Funko.
Yeah, if you're able to find that, please DM us or on Discord.
Also, now while we're on this, I've been wanting to find this clip for a very, very long time, but I just haven't gotten the chance to. So I'm throwing it out here now. If somebody goes and watches all of our lives and timestamps and said the first person to timestamp and send me the link to the live where I fell asleep mid-episode, I will send you a Funko of choice. Because I have no idea what it's for. I completely forgot which one it was from, but it was freaking hilarious, and I haven't watched it back myself ever since.
Sleepy Brando.
Dude, Sleepy Brando's gonna have the best blooper. Your blooper reel is priceless.
Spider Brando's blooper reel is
amazing.
It's amazing. It's a hive mind, right? And it's a hive mind because we are transitioning into Knull. Venom 3, Venom The Last Dance had its second trailer last Thursday. The internet blew up because we had literally like a second of Knull, right? For those that don't know, Knull, the god of the symbiotes, the creator of the symbiotes, basically, the Kinginblack himself. Gents, we talked about this a couple months ago in our should Knull be in Venom The Last Dance? And we kind of said no, right? That was kind of the consensus that we came on. But yet here we are a couple months later. And unfortunately, he's in the movie. We don't know who's playing him just yet. There are reports about it being Norman Reedus. There is no. You heard it here first. Hopefully not first, but this is why you come to us. There is no confirmation about that. So don't just believe it. It's a rumor a lot of people are throwing out still. So, gentlemen, now that we've had almost a week to think about it, and Lou, I'll kick this off over to you since you are reading Kinginblack and you have a fresh perspective on Knull and everything of what he is. How do you feel about this decision?
I'll keep this first thought pretty brief. I don't think it's a good decision. And we've kind of touched on that Thanos comparison of Knull should be a saga level big bad. Like an all-time great big bad. Not a solo film, not a trilogy even. Knull, there's a lot that goes into it, and the hard part here is it could be introduced in a post-credit scene. He could be introduced. Totally understood, but we're missing Carnage, we're missing Venom, we're missing Spider-Man. Like there's so many core pieces that we don't have, and I really don't want them to be rushed. And I'm still grappling with the Donny Cates support that happened because I'm like, dude, you spent a lot of time on this story, and the build for the story was epic. And I don't think people understand just what is lacking to this point. The character look is great. The story concept right now is non-existent. I don't trust Sony. I don't trust the MCU. I don't trust any of them handling symbiotes and the actual lore, especially with what we got from Gore, what we've gotten with Tom Hardy's Venom, what we got with a one shot with Carnage, and uh, there's still a lot that has to be done. And yeah, there's a lot to go into it, but for right now, I would be happy to see Null, but the nerd inside of me is very protective and doesn't want them to let this be the first experience. Tons of people have no idea who Null is to be on the big screen with a Sony movie, and it's just I'd rather have it done right. So it's a nod dog.
Yeah. Spider Brando.
It's a
you,
no for me, dog.
yeah,
After the first day of the trailer came out, I was on a little random high horse of theories and everything. And I thought there's a chance they can cook with it, but they need so many ingredients to make that dish very well. And I'm not too hyped about it anymore. And knowing what you guys know about Noel versus myself, this dude needs to be built up the right way, like Lou said, with Thanos level build up. So many missing parts of like Carnage, Spider-Man, other storylines here and there. I don't like it. I'm scared Sony's just gonna Sony it and he's gonna one off. And that clip that we saw was just a clip from the freaking post credit or like final clip from the movie to throw us off. Because we know Sony loves their false marketing trailers way more than Marvel does. Marvel gets us with edits. Sony straight up plagiarizes us and freaking cuts everything out. All those Spider-Man references in Morbius gone out the window from that trailer. And same with Madam Web. And same with what's the other movie? Venom 2 had a couple where they go from the final movie. So I'm scared Sony's gonna Sony this and nullify Null.
Love that. Yeah, I agree so much, right? And if you know me personally, right, as you guys know, Null is within my top 5 villains of all time. Mainly because when I was getting more into comics, he was the main villain, right? Kinginblack was happening, Venom was building him up. I mean, comics every week kept teasing him coming. Like literally, there was just covers that just said Null is on his way. It was cool. You got to see stories of him decimating colonies and planets, right? Just having no remorse. And then when Kinginblack finally showed up and happened, I mean, issue 1 is insane. That 2-year buildup of him showing up in Venom issue 3 all the way to Kinginblack, and then he comes out and he just wrecks everybody. The Avengers just throw literally everything they have at him, and it's like nothing. And I know some people might not like the story decisions behind it, but I mean, it took a lot to really beat Null. And it was cool. It was very cool. I don't think they're going to be able to do that here, right? Because part of Null's mystique was finding out his lore, right? Seeing how he connected to different characters, right? Seeing how he connected to Gore, how he connected to Carnage, to Venom, to all these other people. And then the little interactions that he had when he fights Thor and he tells him, I know you've seen this or you felt how my sword feels before, or I know, when he kills Sentry, he's like, hey, I know what you did to my symbiote, to my child, basically.
Yeah.
It's so many missing key elements that you can't fabricate it all. And it's just going to feel like a very watered down version. And I think while they might still be able to salvage it, there's a very, very tiny sliver of a chance that they do. But more than likely, what's going to happen is that Sony's going to mess this character up. And then people who are casual fans are going to hate Knull. And then the next time they have an opportunity to do it right, their officials are not going to want to do it. Casual people are not going to want to see it.
I got a decent analogy. Kind of, I know a lot of people that don't like Kang just because of Quantumania. So this is
it's perfect.
Perfect example.
Yeah, it's a perfect example, right? Carnage, even. I mean, you look at Carnage. Carnage is a top tier villain. Yet after Let There Be Carnage, you've heard the clamor for a Carnage anything goes down a lot. So for them to even tease this is cruel on a trailer. Because I think, kind of like Lou, you were saying, if they were going to actually do this in some sort of way, save it for the movie. Save it for the movie, save it for the post-credit. That way you don't have time for the internet to be like, oh my God, this is so cool. And then when you let them down, everybody's like, oh, I hate this. Where, like Minty, like you're saying, I'd rather watch Venom gamble the entire time in Las Vegas.
And so many of my friends have just said that to me recently. Like they pick up that one thing in the trailer and that's all they care about.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that feeds into the gambling edition or like them not realizing how impactful like Knull should be.
But you're not going to if you don't know who he is. And that's reasonable.
That's true. That's true.
But real quick, this isn't necessarily a knock on Knull. This is a representation of how Eddie Brock and Venom have been portrayed and treated in the Venomverse, in so many Spider-Mans. Like, there's so many things that have to happen first before Knull can even really come around. And, like, you don't have a solid Venom. And the character of Eddie Brock, he's a joke. He's a joke, in my opinion. I think the way that Tom Hardy portrays him, I don't like it. And when you get the build of, like, the xenomorphs or whatever they're called, they're coming and you get that look, it's like you get your surprise of like, why are the symbiotes here? What is going on? This shouldn't be happening. And you pull other characters in. When you get a Spider-Man who's like, yo, what is happening right now? When you get an X-Men or the Maker or Fantastic Four or some other characters who have gravity, they're like, this is a problem. You can't just have Venom be like, oh, they're coming to get me. They shouldn't have been here. Blah 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 blah. Like, okay, like cool. That's one thing. But the second piece to this, that's like this big shadow that's being cast over it, is this is supposed to be the final movie for Venom. Where do you go from here? Like you've already told us, it's the literal title is The Last Dance. So I'm like, you're introducing the biggest thing that happened to symbiotes in the final movie, and we get cameos or a carryover to the MCU when Sony has a vice grip on the characters they can use. Like the real world aspect of this really muddies the future of what could be great if this is the intro, but it's very finite and the expectation has been set that like we're moving on. So that doesn't help me feel good or better about the possibilities of Knull, who is like the fourth character who's supposed to be the big bad if you go into the MCU. Like it doesn't make sense to me.
There's no world where he fits anywhere outside of this universe. That's the problem, especially with timing with where Secret Wars is coming up and Doomsday. There is no universe where he fits in nicely without it messing up everything and them messing Knull up entirely. Right. And to the point, it goes beyond Knull, like you were saying, where Kinginblack and the entire Venom run is kind of Venom and Eddie working up finally the courage to really go and face him. You know, because they're kind of scared of him. Rightfully so.
And a lot of that has to do with Carnage.
Yeah, rightfully so, because they could barely stop Carnage.
Yeah.
In absolute Carnage.
Yeah.
So, you know, them not having that buildup and really giving more character development to Eddie and Venom themselves, right? Because once they come out of this, spoiler alert, but it's in the name, they come out on top as the Kinginblack, which is a huge thing. It's a huge power level increase for Venom that he still has right now, to the point where he's one of the strongest characters right now. But you can't do that without this. You know, you can't do that. And it's just going to suck. And it sounds like we're being very negative, but it's like, there's no way that, and even if they just, let's say they connect it within their own, you know, Sony cinematic universe, who are they realistically going to put up against Knull? Because let's say Venom dies at the end of this, or Eddie dies. Who do you have? Madam Web? What's she going to do? You know, look at him in the future till he dies? No.
Yeah.
What's Craven? What's Craven going to do? You know? You know what's Craven gonna do? You know what's Morbius gonna do? Dance him to death?
Morbin time.
It's Morbin time. Yeah. You know, it's just like
we don't even know if those are all part of the same universe either.
Here's the thing I want to throw in there
this
too.
This is what we got. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sony Cinematic Universe without Spider-Man.
Right.
So it pisses me
We're
off.
not even talking about the gap of like Spider-Man had the symbiote before Eddie Brock got it. Like that's like some of the most core thing that you could ever. That's a burger with no burger. It's just bun. But
you burger no mustard.
You get like.
I'm sorry.
Whatever. But for those people that are like, it doesn't have to be exactly like the comics. Well, one, if you're saying that, you've definitely never read it. But two, Secret Invasion is a great example of exactly what we're talking about. That's the scale that we're condensing and watering this down to be like, this is supposed to be some huge event. And it's like, yo, you guys gave us 5% of it and then created your own story that makes absolutely no sense and no one wanted this.
Yeah.
So what was the point? Like
Yeah.
You wasted 6 weeks of our time or 2 hours of our time or whatever for to lead us down a road that really goes nowhere. It just got a decent box office or review hype. Like that's pointless in my opinion.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? It's first impressions matter to people, right? Yeah. It really does. So when you see a character for the first time on live action, if it's not necessarily a good one, that's going to be people's impressions for a very long time, right? And if Knull gets that treatment, heck, when Venom gets that treatment again, it's going to take a lot to really win people over, because if not, they're not going to sit there and be like, wow, I love this, you know? So, you know, it'll be interesting to see what ends up happening out of it, right? Are you guys excited for Knull? Let us know. Hopefully you're not, because there's better things to be excited about, like Fantastic Four and Superman, right? Because those first impressions are going to be everything for people. They're going to be everything for a lot of people. So, welcome to our deep dive. Once again, officially on the road to Superman and Fantastic Four at the same time. Why these movies are important, right? We've talked about why Fantastic Four as characters are important, and we've talked about why Superman as a character is very important, why that matters, right? But we haven't talked about exactly why these movies matter. So a lot of people, I think, kind of have negative impressions, right, about Superman and Fantastic Four. Spider Brando, what do you feel like you personally, right? Because I think you're someone kind of like all three of us, right, that have only gotten into them more recently, a little more hardcore. What do you feel like your personal hurdles have been in terms of Superman and Fantastic Four?
I would say, what were you
I
gonna add
thought,
something to it?
no, I thought you were muted for some reason.
Oh no. Um, I think one is just like the what's the word? Quantity of content growing up. I haven't had much Superman content that's been as like popular or like brought into my life as compared to Batman, Spider-Man, um, other heroes like that. And same with Fantastic Four. Like, sure, there was Man of Steel that I had, and then Batman first Superman and Justice League. And ongoing now is like my Adventures with Superman. But I don't know, I was never really like exposed to them, so they just never hit like that mainstream type level. And same with Fantastic Four. I love growing up Fantastic Four 1 and 2, but looking back at them now, those are some cheeks. Um, but like as a kid, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's cool." But they never had like as many TV shows as Spider-Man had, so I never got to see different versions of them. It was always just those couple, and that's just eh. Um, so being able to go and get fresh takes, potential fresh takes, and like what we've been talking or following along production wise the last couple months is really exciting for me as someone getting into these characters to get like faithful comic adaptations. Like New has always hyped about going into Deadpool and Wolverine, getting that iconic Wolverine suit. As I've been learning more and more about these characters, I'm hoping to build that hype up for Superman and Fantastic Four when they come out next July.
Very nice,
Yeah.
very nice.
Hero, what's been your hurdle?
For me personally, I think it's a combination of just the internet and seeing how these characters have been portrayed possibly better in films in other genres like anime, right? Where I think we've talked about this a lot before, where you have your overpowered character be presented really well in animes like My Hero and many others. Um, you have that family dynamic be presented better, right, than in Fantastic One, Two, and then the newest or the latest Fantastic Four that came out. They don't let you have that connection, right? And I'll be honest, I'm not, even though I'm into comics, I'm not someone who has read a lot of Fantastic Four and Superman. So I think kind of like what Spanner Brando is saying, it comes out of a place of ignorance in a way of these characters, not knowing enough about them. And that really lets you form and just kind of say things that people who don't know as well. It lets you be more agreeable to those things they say, where they're like, oh, Superman's a boring character because he's overpowered and he doesn't, or Fantastic Four are just boring people because they're just a family and there's other families in comics too, blah, blah, blah. So it's like you have all these things in your ear, and because you don't know enough, you just go along with it. And I think that's kind of what's been happening. But when you open your mind up and you start reading and you start really realizing what they represent and what they are and what they do, it becomes very different.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I've been seeing a trend on Twitter recently where people would just compare to the canon, like what's actually canon to the character versus the fanon of what the fans think is canon. And what you just described was like, I felt like you were on my For You page this entire time. Because when you look into, I saw one for Superman. I wish I had it or could reference it, but I saw one for Superman, and it kind of attacked a lot of the Snyder Superman fans. So I'm sorry, Snyder fans, but also not so sorry. And like it broke down all the canon events of how he's just super smart, obviously, like just so much things that the common person doesn't really realize about Superman. And then the fan in of how everybody just thinks he's just one bad day away from being a freaking devil, or just like the injustice line thing, which yes and no, it's not just one bad day. It's a lot of there's a lot of stuff that goes into it, but people don't realize that. Um so yeah, I think just based on the type of movies we've had and mainstream stuff we've had over the last couple years, these movies are important to remarket what Superman and Fantastic Four are.
Just to follow up on that from my perspective, the big thing for me of why these movies are important is it's going to showcase what it means to be human in two very different ways. And I think a lot of people miss that because you have, for Superman, you have again an OP character who has a very out of this world, no pun intended, power set. And then for the Fantastic Four, you have a group of fantastical characters that are very unique in certain ways. Not so unique on an individual level, but unique in the way that they interact together, given what their abilities are and how they, had their origins. And I think that goes into the biggest hurdle for me is I never felt that it was an exploration of what it means to be human in a lot of ways when it comes to live action interpretations of both Superman and the Fantastic Four. I think that they tried and they swung and they miss in a lot of ways because they weren't grounded. And I know that's really hard to say for, again, two movies that are, they're way out there. They're very cosmic in their own sense. But it's that relatability, that human aspect, what it means, what's your brand of justice? How do you really portray with great power comes great responsibility? That's exactly what happens with both of these two characters. More specifically, if we boil down Superman and Reed Richards. So these are going to be really important, based on how they explore those two main characters and what foundation do they give us moving forward because they're both going to be in their respective universes for a long time. Long, maybe a little bit different in the MCU, just in terms of frequency of appearances, maybe not length of years, like a decade. But if they can get over the darker aspect in terms of tone and style and really play in the darker aspect of what is good, what is bad, and give you that, I think these portrayals of these teams and individual characters will be some of the best we've ever seen in live action since 1989.
Ooh. I want to bring up a quote from Grant Morrison that struck a chord when you were talking about the humanity in Superman. Let me screen share real quick. But he had pretty much discussed about American writers often say they find it difficult to write Superman. They say he's too powerful. You can't give him problems, but Superman is a metaphor for him. Superman has the same problems we do as a human, but on a Paul Bunyan scale.
Mhm.
If Superman walks a dog, he walks it around the asteroid belt because the crypto or the dog can fly in space and he can fly in space. but he's still walking his dog like a human to relieve some stress. When Superman, or to do his pet owner's duty as well, when Superman's relatives visit, they come from the 31st century and bring some hellish monster conqueror from the future, just like when family members bring their in-laws over. But it's still a story about your relatives visiting. And such a human aspect has truly been lost about these characters, like you mentioned. And reading this quote and knowing how well received a lot of Grant Morrison's Superman stories are, and dealing with like the humanity of Superman, makes me want to pick that omnibus up like right now and start reading it.
Yeah. It's a very nice quote, and it's mainly also because when you start reading the comics and really seeing how they are, and realizing what they stand for too, right? That's when you start seeing that relatability within them. And I think a very good example of that for Superman is Superman for All Seasons, where it's just Superman going through life as a teen into a young adult, and how he deals with the changes of wanting to be there for his family, wanting to protect what he can, which I think is a very normal thing that anybody would want to do, no matter what position you are in. It's him dealing with him losing and gaining love. It's him dealing with moving away from his family and how that affects him. Fantastic Four in a similar way, where it's like a lot of people are obsessed with just getting the maker, right? They want to see the maker right away. They're like, hey, the maker's going to be so cool when he comes out. But the problem with the maker is that the maker won't hit as hard unless you have a Reed that you can understand and relate to. Where Reed, yes, he is incredibly smart, but he's so smart that sometimes he falls into the thing that, let's be honest, all of us as humans have done from time to time. We get too confident in ourselves and it lands in his face, or him obsessing over something so much that it makes him become blind to red flags and lose focus, right? Where I think, and Spider-Man, or like we were saying earlier in our keep reading, which is why I personally really like Fantastic Four Life Story. I know it's kind of a rehash of comics, but so is Spider-Man Life Story. So I feel like the people that say that kind of are off base when it comes to that. It's just a very more real human story that goes into the eyes of the Fantastic Four. And for example, it takes a deep dive into what happens if just Reed obsesses over something for so long. What happens? What happens if that is literally his life? How does that affect other people? How does that affect the world? And sometimes that's relatable because we see people go through that. We know someone who probably is that way.
Yeah.
We know someone who's probably in the same situation as the Thing, where, of course, they're not some sort of rock creature, but they have self-confidence issues.
Yeah.
They feel like they don't deserve to be loved. But yet here they are. It's very fundamental human things, right? And then going back to something that Minty said, I see a lot of people when it comes to Fantastic Four and why they don't like it. They say it's very cookie cutter superhero stuff. But what we have to remember is they were the first ones to do it. They established a lot of stuff. A lot of the tropes that we love is because of the Fantastic Four. So without them,
And Superman.
And Superman, you don't get those things. You don't get that. You don't get a family of comics without Fantastic Four. You don't get your overpowered super person going through things without Superman.
I got a quote to add. You don't get comics without Superman. A quote from Hero from a prior episode. And if anyone could clip that quote and send it to me, you get a Funko too.
Yeah, specifically from Spider-Man and not from me, because I didn't offer that. But
yeah, I got a lot to get rid of. I can't buy small. And
but yeah,
boosting engagement.
Boosting engagement for sure. But yeah, no, I agree. these movies are going to be incredibly important, and hopefully they lay that groundwork of Lou, like you said, really making them relatable in their own different ways, to where someone can look at Johnny, Sue, Reed, Ben, Superman, Clark, Lois, and really see that themselves in those characters.
I want to add this one thing because I think we've talked about each of these movies on an individual level. How can they be kind of the best that they can be on their own? But I like the fact that, as we've been on this road to Superman and Fantastic Four, it sounds like leading up to the movie that each of these characters are going to be living in or coming from a world that has existed. And I think that's something that's going to be very refreshing because it gives them the ability to really create this world through the eyes of the character instead of letting the world create the character as this is an origin. And I think that was a big mistake in a lot of ways for both of the last iterations of these movies of, well, the original of, Man of Steel. He was really molded by his world.
Yeah.
And he will be, and he is. But what I mean is, for that first impressions piece that we were kind of talking about, there's so much more. So when we see something about the character, we know that there's a lot of history, and that history, once we fill those gaps, is going to help develop their future. That's something. There's, it's zero, but we're going to go into the negatives type of thing. That's not really how it was when we got, Fantastic Four, one, and then again the 2015. It was New World. Here it is. It's established, but it's a go forward type of thing. Again, leading to kind of nowhere. Each of these characters are going to come from a place where stuff has already went down, and we're going to have to figure out and kind of have that mystery and intrigue of who are they, who were they, and kind of what will they be. That's going to help, I think, catapult them into a level that we haven't gotten with either of them in, some say, ever, live action, and kind of a long time from a comic, reader perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be nice to really see them get their time in the sun again. Right. And maybe the problem with the general audience is that since they've been around so long, people just think we've seen everything we can with these characters, and they tend to fall out of popularity to newer characters, to different characters, right? Because again, when you think about it, Superman's been around for so long, and then in reality, so have the Fantastic Four. So, you know, it's been a while since we've seen them on screen. So hopefully, this absence really lets people develop a taste for them again. But I think it's an exciting time to be a fan for both of these franchises, right? Whether you just like the movies or you read the comics as well. Um, it's a very good time to try and get into them. That's why actually next week, kind of a little peep for next week's deep dive, we're going to be talking about the history of Fantastic Four in comics. We're going to be talking about different stories, different ones, and why they are the way that they are, how they're looked upon. So if that's something that interests you, definitely make sure you come back here to Point 3 Podcast to be, educated, and let's just talk about it, because these are super, super interesting conversations because of that. So yeah, that's our live. A lot of great stuff. Gentlemen, any last minute things you wanna throw out there?
I've really want to watch Superman 1978, and I have a confession. I've never
Uh-oh.
seen it before. At least
Well,
I'm sure I have, but as
you'll
a
do good
really
things,
small
man. It's all
child,
right.
and but
You'll-
within the last 10 years of my life, I definitely haven't seen it. And the hype that the Reeves Superman, Super/Man movie coming out about his story, it's making me really want to rewatch it or watch it and
Yeah.
get hyped to go back on the Superman journey, as it's kind of been on a hiatus.
Yeah.
yeah.
It'll be on the road. He'll be on
Yeah.
the road. Maybe we do a watch party.
I was gonna say we will probably end up
that was
talking
the
about it.
plan.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I was gonna say go for it because I don't want to steal your thunder.
Speaking of watch parties, I think it's time to go down a road of the Witch's Road with Agatha all along in our Discord. So if you are not in there, hop in right now. Link is in our bios somewhere. And I'll probably be starting it about 5 minutes after we end the live because I got a bathroom break.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, everybody, we won't hold you so we can get to Agatha all along. But to all of you who joined the live, thank you so much. If you are watching this recorded later on, thank you as well for making it towards the end of this video. We appreciate you so much. Again, join us back next week where we'll be talking more on the road to Fantastic Four. If you aren't subscribed to us, make sure you subscribe, you like, you comment. We appreciate all those things, small gestures that go a long way for us. So thank you. And if you want to share us with your friends that like movies, comics, games, throw our channel their way. We'd love to have them in here as well. So everybody in the chat, thank you so much for being here once again. We are your favorite trio of hosts, Lou, Spider Brando, and myself, Hero Scroll. We'll see you on Discord for Agatha all along, and we will see you next Wednesday for another Wednesday live stream. And there are 3 very important things you have to keep doing. You need to keep watching, you need to keep reading, and you need to keep nerding out. Everybody, we will see you next Wednesday.